But look, let's move on now to the Walkleys, which is the biggest night for Australian journalists. Some of the biggest names in the industry gathered last night to congratulate each other on their journalism. But the event wasn't without controversy. Meet Patrick Abboud, one of the co-hosts of the event who also happens to be a hardened Palestinian activist. Well, towards the end of the night, Abboud urged all journalists in the audience to push for a ceasefire in the Israeli conflict. Now, keep in mind, there were Jewish journalists in the room, one of whom told me that they were appalled that the event had been hijacked by activists. It is completely inappropriate, but it gives you an insight into the media class and where many of them sit on this issue. But the controversy did not stop there. You might remember on this show we discussed a move by the Walkleys to only accept female nominations for the Outstanding Contribution to Journalism Award. The reason was that 7 awards had gone to women over the years, but 21 men had also won it, making the data imbalanced. So last night, as they announced this award, no less than 8 different female journalists won it. They all stood up and accepted the award, and they all made speeches. Some, I am told, were quite lengthy. And it makes me think, how many people wouldn't accept an award fundamentally given to skew data in favour of gender equality? Well, Tim, there are 2 aspects to the scandals at the Walkleys. The one I'd like to get you to react on is getting 8 different female journalists to stand up to accept an award purely so that the end result data is gender equality. To me, that seems absurd.
It also seems absurd that the Walkley committees decided to give awards based on the sex of the journalists, and then post that, having decided that these people are a block, then allowed them to give individual speeches. Surely, if they're going to review them as this, this uniform collective, one speech would have been sufficient that they'd all perhaps agreed upon. So that one is weird. But also, I'd point out that there was an additional controversy during the year about the Walkleys that might have faded a little bit during the ceremony. Earlier this year, Australia's brave cartoonists, left-wing cartoonist community, decided they would boycott the Walkleys, having discovered quite late in life, some of them, and some of them had already won Walkley Awards, they discovered the awards were named after a guy who was an oil magnate who'd been, I think, the founder of Appalled Oil, and they learned about this. Anyway, the cartoon actually, the cartoon award went to a Chinese dissident cartoonist, I'm just looking at his pronunciation, Badu Chow, who's an anti-communist activist. So it was quite appropriate that an anti-commie won a prize boycotted by so many lefty virtue signallers. Very good.
Oh, I love it. You can never be too woke, can you? And I guess this brings us to the other point, probably the primary point of outrage, is Palestinian activists using this event as a vehicle to push journalists to call for a ceasefire.
It's shameful the way that they've been allowed to hijack what should be the gold standard for journalistic standards, and it should be completely neutral and balanced. And we're still seeing at the ABC that their news and current affairs broadcasts continue to quote Hamas spokespeople who are denying the massacre or denying that Hamas hides rockets under hospitals. Chris Mitchell in the Australian newspaper in his Monday column made a very good point about that. It's the equivalent of the spokesman for bin Laden denying that Al-Qaeda flew planes into the World Trade Center, the Pentagon. It's shameful. I mean, I wasn't there, thankfully, but had I been there, I would have been outraged and very upset to see that, as I'm sure the Jewish journalist that you mentioned was.
Yeah.